red dress, a glittering ballroom, and a CEO whose name made people lower their voices. By midnight, she was alone. Then a man, holding nothing but a glass of water, offered her more than help. He offered hope. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss stories like this. Her crimson gown shimmered under the golden chandeliers, as if the lights themselves existed only to honor her. Every step she took wasn't casual, it was a statement. I am power. Her name was Reese Langford, the woman Chicago spoke of in equal parts admiration and fear. When she passed, conversations froze mid-sentence. Men adjusted their ties. Women glanced down at their dresses, silently comparing. She wasn't just another guest. She was the reason people showed up, the reason they stayed, and inevitably, the reason they left talking. The ballroom was a performance of luxury. Crystal chandeliers scattering light across mirrored walls, champagne bubbling in crystal flutes, laughter that sounded a little too rehearsed to be real. A live jazz band in the corner stitched golden notes into the air, turning sound into silk. This was the kind of night every executive circled on the calendar, not out of excitement, but out of survival. Because one wrong word near Reese Langford could end a career, and one perfect compliment could open the kind of doors most people never even got to knock on. Her dress, a flame of scarlet between marble and glass, seemed almost alive. When she smiled, people leaned in. When she laughed, they echoed it, even when the joke wasn't funny. Every tilt of her glass, every pause before she spoke, was deliberate. She had built her empire on control, and earned a reputation that made her untouchable. But under the weight of a dozen champagne flutes, that precision began to slip. At first it was subtle, a small stumble quickly buried beneath a polished laugh. A glass lifted too quickly, bubbles spilling across her wrist. Most people pretended not to notice. Because watching the center of your universe lose balance is something no one wants to face. Reese Langford wasn't supposed to falter. Not here, not tonight, not in front of the people who feared her, or wanted to be her. Yet as the night stretched on, the fire of her dress flickered differently. What once looked like confidence began to look like exhaustion. What once felt powerful now seemed painfully fragile. The rhythm of her heels broke its perfect tempo against the marble floor. By midnight, she stood at the ballroom's edge, one hand on the doorframe, as if the marble itself was the only thing keeping her upright. And in that moment, beneath the gold light, the fading laughter and the whispers that dared not carry, the untouchable woman everyone feared, looked achingly human. Got it. I'm suit pressed, but not expensive. Shoes clean, though the edges were starting to wear down. In his hand, not champagne, not whiskey, not a crystal flute raised in some fake toast. Just a plain glass of water. Everyone else was drifting from circle to circle, laughing too loudly, topping off their drinks, reaching for proximity to power. Ethan didn't move. Not because he was shy, but because he had no interest in joining them. This room was survival for them. For him, it was an obligation. His job required him to be here. His life did not. Ethan's real world was miles away, in a small apartment where a little girl named Maddie was asleep under a pink blanket, and a nightlight shaped like a moon. A neighbor he trusted was watching her. He'd checked twice. He'd called once just to hear, "She's out. She's okay." He'd promised himself years ago that he would never waste nights chasing approval from people who didn't matter, because he knew how fast life could break. He remembered the night everything split. Rain on the glass, the hum of the refrigerator in their old kitchen, Maddie barely 1 year old breathing softly in her crib, and then the phone call, a drunk driver, headlights where they shouldn't have been, his wife's laughter gone in a sound he could still hear in his sleep. Since that night, alcohol wasn't fun to him. It wasn't celebration. It was a thief with nice glassware, so he stayed sober. Not because he couldn't handle a drink, because Maddie deserved a father who never disappeared on her. He wasn't here tonight to socialize. He wasn't here to flirt. He definitely wasn't here to impress Reese Langford. He was here so he could keep his paycheck steady, keep rent paid, keep groceries in the fridge, keep Maddie's world stable. Responsibility, not ambition, sat on his shoulders. But even while he told himself, "Stay quiet, stay out of it," Leave when you can. He couldn't stop watching her. Reese. The woman in the scarlet dress. The woman the entire room revolved around. The woman they all either feared or wanted something from. Everyone else saw power when they looked at her. Ethan saw something else. He caught the tiny break in her balance that no one else acknowledged. The way her laugh got just a little too sharp near the end. The way her glass kept refilling like no one dared tell her that's enough. The way her pupils lagged a second behind her smile. They worshipped the fire. He saw the burn, the contrast. Between them could have been a movie poster. Her, wrapped in red light, reputation like steel. Him, in the shadows, steady, quiet, grief-worn, holding nothing but water. Her whole life was built on control, money, leverage, fear. His whole life was built on a 7-year-old girl who still asked, "Daddy, are you staying home tonight?" They lived in different universes, but distance doesn't always stay distance. Ethan's grip tightened around the glass. Cold condensation slipped under his fingers, grounding him. The ballroom around him blurred. Laughter, clinking crystal. Deals whispered behind half smiles. And for a moment he wasn't in that room at all. He was back at the funeral. Black umbrellas. Rain sliding off like tears that wouldn't stop. People saying, "If you ever need anything," and meaning none of it. Maddie barely old enough to understand anything except that Mommy wasn't coming back. That was the night he made the promise. No alcohol in the house. No, I'll be there soon, and then never showing up. No letting his daughter feel abandoned twice. He'd kept that promise. Every single day. So while the rest of the ballroom floated in champagne, Ethan stayed anchored in something they couldn't understand. He watched Reese, not with judgment, not with pity, with awareness, because he knew the slope she was standing on. He knew how fast "I'm fine" could become "call 911. He'd lived at the bottom of that slope. The music swelled. The laughter rose and then thinned as the hour got later and the room began to empty. Executives drifted toward the exits, eager to disappear before Reese saw them leave. The sparkle was fading. The performance was ending, and that was when Ethan saw it. Reese Langford, the woman. Everybody tiptoed around, was standing near the doorframe with her hand braced against the marble like it was the only thing holding her. Up, her driver wasn't there. Her assistant was gone. Her protection, her armor, her audience all gone. For the first time all night she wasn't surrounded, she was exposed. People noticed. Of course they did. But their eyes slid away fast. No one went to her. No one asked if she was okay. Because in rooms like this, acknowledging weakness is dangerous. Ethan didn't walk away. He set his empty water glass on a passing tray, rolled his shoulders once and started toward her. Not out of duty. Out of choice. He moved slowly, calm, not to embarrass her, just close enough so she wouldn't fall. When he reached her, his voice was low, steady, private. "Ma'am," he said, respectful but firm, "do you need a ride?" She turned toward him, eyes a little unfocused, trying to lock on. Her mouth curved in something almost like a bitter smile. "Cole," she said, using his last name like a shield, then softer, almost annoyed with herself for needing anyone at all. "Right." Ethan didn't flinch. "Yes," he said quietly. "Let me drive you home." "It's late." "It's not safe," her pride kicked up immediately. "I don't need your help. I have drivers, cars, I have everything." She gestured vaguely toward the valet, which at that hour was already empty. "Not tonight, you don't," Ethan said. He wasn't mocking her. There was no judgment in it. "Just something calm and immovable, please," he said softly. "Trust me." There was a long pause. For a woman like Reese Langford, trust wasn't romantic. It was war. It was leverage, but this didn't feel like leverage. This felt like being held up when your knees won't. She let out a frustrated breath, not quite defeat, not quite surrender, and let her hand slide off the doorframe. She let him steady her, and together, quietly they walked out, under chandeliers that had witnessed her at her highest, and now this. Her power looked different in that moment. It wasn't the sharpness in her eyes. It wasn't the scarlet dress. It wasn't the way people whispered her name. It was this, letting someone see her fall and letting him catch her. Ethan opened the car door. "Careful," he said softly. "Watch your step." It wasn't a command. It was respect. Reese hesitated, as if her pride wanted one last fight, then slid into the passenger seat. The door shut, muting the world behind her. This wasn't her world. No black car, no driver, no tinted windows, no power. Just a plain sedan that smelled faintly of pine, its dashboard scratched from years of use. Yet somehow, here she felt safer than she had all evening. Ethan buckled his seatbelt and glanced her way. "Yours too," he said gently. "Please." She looked at him, half challenge, half curiosity, and then clicked it into place. That small sound carried a strange kind of peace, like surrender that didn't feel like defeat. The car rolled forward, city lights streaking across the windshield like falling stars. For a while, neither spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was the kind that gives both people room to breathe. Finally, Reese broke it. "People think success makes you untouchable," she said quietly. "They think being at the top must feel incredible." A dry breath escaped, something between a sigh and a laugh. "They never see what it costs." "They don't see me. They see the title." Ethan's eyes stayed on the road. After a few seconds, he answered, "Everyone's fighting something. Some just hide it better than others." Reese turned toward him. It was the first time she'd looked at him not as an employee, but as a man with a life beyond the company walls. "And what's yours, Ethan?" He didn't rush his answer. When he finally spoke, it was calm but heavy with memory. "I lost my wife. A drunk driver ran a red light. Maddie was still a baby." Reese's gaze fell to her hands. He continued, voice lower now. "Since that night, alcohol stopped being a celebration. It's not fun. It's not harmless. It's a reminder. So I stay away from it. Not because I can't handle it, but because my daughter deserves a father who shows up." Every single morning, the car stayed silent except for the hum of the tires. In that stillness, their roles blurred. They were no longer boss and employee, just two people who knew what it felt like to lose something precious. Reese leaned her head against the window. Neon lights painted her face in shifting colors, red, blue, gold, like emotions she'd forgotten how to feel. "You carry that alone?" she asked softly. Ethan's answer came slow, honest. "It's not about me. It's about Maddie. Her world doesn't get to fall apart just because mine did." That line hung in the air, simple and devastating. Reese closed her eyes. For the first time all night, she wasn't talking, performing, or commanding. She was just quiet, and it felt strangely right. She didn't feel like the CEO of a billion-dollar empire. She felt like a woman being seen. Ethan didn't look at her, but he eased off the gas a little, taking the long way through the sleeping city, giving her time to breathe before the night ended. The city was quiet. Streetlights flickered like tired stars as Ethan Cole pulled up in front of a glass tower that seemed too perfect for real life. He turned off the engine. "Home," he said quietly. "You're here." Reese Langford stared straight ahead, her reflection faint in the window. "I'm fine," she said softly, automatically. Even she didn't believe it. Ethan stepped out, came around, and opened her door. He didn't offer his hand at first, just waited, steady. When she tried to step out, her heel caught. She stumbled. He caught her before she fell. "Easy," he murmured. Their eyes met. For once, hers didn't look sharp, just tired. They walked through the marble lobby in silence. The concierge glanced up, then quickly looked away. Some things were better not to witness. Inside the elevator, Reese leaned lightly against the mirrored wall. Her reflection looked different. Smudged eyeliner, unsteady poise, a woman she hardly recognized. At the penthouse door, Ethan paused. "I'll make sure you're okay, then I'll go." She didn't argue this time. The door opened to a world of glass and gold. Everything was flawless except her. The silence in the apartment was louder than the ballroom had ever been. Ethan crossed to the kitchen, filled a crystal glass with water, and set it on the table. "Drink," he said gently. "It'll help." Reese looked at him. Her voice came out low, almost breaking. "Why are you helping me?" He didn't hesitate. "Because I know what it feels like when no one stays." That was it. No speech, no drama, just truth. Something in her face shifted. For the first time all night, she didn't hide behind control. She simply sat there silent. Ethan nodded once. "Get some rest, Miss Langford." Then he left. No number, no promise, no pride. Just the quiet click of the door. Reese sat alone. The city lights spilled across the floor, glittering like strangers. The glass of water waited on the table, a faint ring of moisture forming beneath it. She stared at it for a long time. No one in her world had cared without reason until tonight. That glass wasn't just water. It was proof she hadn't been completely alone. Morning light spilled through the penthouse windows. The city glittered below, but Reese Langford sat in silence. On the table, the empty glass of water still waited. The faint ring beneath it reminded her that someone had cared enough to make sure she got home safely. She whispered to herself, "He didn't want anything from me." A touch of shame and gratitude. For once, she hadn't been left alone. Later that day, the office buzzed as usual, fast steps, files, pressure. But Reese's voice carried a different tone, quieter, calmer. She pressed the intercom. "Send in Ethan Cole." Outside, people glanced at each other, surprised. Ethan rarely stood in the spotlight. He entered, steady as ever. "Ma'am, you asked for me?" Reese looked at him for a moment, then said softly, "Thank you. For last night." Ethan gave a simple nod. "Just wanted to be sure you got home safe." Reese's voice lost its usual sharpness. "It wasn't nothing, Ethan. You treated me with respect when I wasn't exactly at my best. Most people wouldn't." Silence filled the room. After that day, something shifted. In meetings, when others fought for her attention, she'd suddenly pause and ask, "Ethan, what's your take?" The room would freeze. Ethan spoke plainly without show, and Reese actually listened. The next change was quieter. During a morning briefing, she asked, "Maddie doing okay today?" A small question, but it meant everything. People started to notice Reese Langford seemed different. Still strong, but not cold, and she knew why. It began the night a man offered nothing but a ride home, and left behind a simple glass of water. Days passed, and something subtle began to change. The office still moved at its usual pace. Meetings, reports, deadlines, but the energy felt different. Reese Langford was still sharp, still in control, yet there was a new calm in her presence. Ethan Cole stayed the same, steady, punctual, focused, the man who finished his work and went home to his daughter. But when he and Reese crossed paths, the air seemed to shift. In meetings, she often turned to him unexpectedly. "Ethan, what's your take?" The room would fall silent. His answers were simple, grounded, never dressed up for approval. And she listened. That quiet respect slowly built something unspoken between them. One evening, long after most of the staff had left, Reese closed her laptop. Ethan passed by with a file in hand. She looked up and said softly, "Walk with me." It wasn't an order. It was an invitation. They stepped outside into the fading light. The city glowed in amber and gold, traffic humming like a distant river. For a while, neither spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was peaceful. Reese finally smiled, faint but real. "Strange," she said. "Out here, I almost feel normal." Ethan looked at her. "Maybe normal isn't so bad." She laughed quietly, a small, honest sound. As they crossed the street, her hand brushed his. He started to pull back, but she didn't let go. For a moment, their fingers stayed together. Not as promise, not as romance, just understanding. They kept walking side by side beneath the soft glow of city lights. No grand words, no confessions, just two people learning how to be seen. Reese Langford, who had built walls her whole life, was slowly letting someone through. And Ethan Cole, who had carried only responsibility and grief, felt something he hadn't in years. Quiet hope. Neither of them called it anything. But both knew it had begun. Reese was about to leave when Ethan appeared by the door. "I'll bring the car around," he said. She shook her head. "You don't have to." He smiled faintly. "I know." Silence followed, comfortable, not awkward. Two people who didn't need to explain anything. Reese looked out at the rain and whispered, "Do you ever get tired of being the good one?" Ethan glanced at her, calm as ever. "Someone has to be." For a moment she smiled, softly, honestly. No titles, no walls, just two lives slowly finding peace in each other's quiet company. Ethan Cole had been quiet for days. He worked as usual, but his focus was gone. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his usual calm seemed strained. After a meeting, Reese Langford said softly, "Ethan, stay for a moment." When everyone left, she looked at him. "What's going on?" He hesitated, then said, "It's Maddie. She's been sick. I spent the night at the hospital." Reese's expression shifted. "She's all right?" "They're still doing tests," he said quietly. "I'm just trying to balance everything." Reese watched him for a long moment, not as his boss, but as a person. Then she said, "Go, be with her." "I can't just leave," he started. Reese interrupted, "You can. I'll take care of it. Your daughter comes first. It wasn't an order. It was permission. Real, human permission." That night at the hospital, a nurse brought a small package to Maddie's room. Inside were 2 warm drinks, a soft pink blanket, and a small note that read, "For Maddie." Our Ethan looked at the card and didn't speak for a long time. No one had done something like that for him in years. It wasn't charity. It wasn't pity. It was care, simple and genuine. And for Reese Langford, it was the first time she'd ever reached out to someone not out of duty or power, but from the heart. Weeks passed. Maddie got better and Ethan returned to work. Reese didn't say much. She simply greeted him with a quiet smile that said more than words ever could. The distance between them was gone. They spoke less but understood more. Reese had lowered her walls, and Ethan, for the first time in years, had let someone in. One Friday evening, Reese closed her laptop and stopped by his desk. "Coffee?" she asked. A simple word, but it carried meaning. Later, the 3 of them, Reese, Ethan, and little Maddie, sat in a small corner cafe. Maddie played with the foam on her hot chocolate, and Reese watched her, smiling softly, a kind of smile that hadn't touched her face in years. "She likes you," Ethan said quietly. Reese glanced at him and replied, "I like her too." A pause. Then she added, "You know, Ethan, you changed how I see people." He looked down, smiled faintly. "Maybe you just started seeing them for real." Reese laughed. A real laugh this time, light and unguarded. Outside, the city lights shimmered against the windows. No promises, no grand gestures, just a sense of peace, as if both finally understood what they'd been missing. Reese Langford, who once believed strength meant distance, now knew that vulnerability was just another kind of courage. And Ethan Cole, who had lived years holding everything together alone, finally realized that sometimes one quiet act of kindness can change an entire life.